Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, stay tuned for another original Studio B production right here on the Voice17104.com.
Welcome, my brothers and sisters, to the Richard James Show on 17104, The Voice. Just a closer walk with thee. Grant it, Jesus, if you please. Hear me walking close to thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. I am weak, but thou art strong. Jesus keeps me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long. Let me walk, let me talk close to thee. Brothers and sisters, friends, member of the broader community, it is truly a blessing to be here today, and that's to be here on the planet Earth. And thank God for the ability for us to communicate around the world and lift up the truth. And as my Christian friends would say, lift up the blood-stained banner. Because you know, if you tell the truth, that banner is going to be stained with your blood. We live in a situation here in the continental United States of America where bigotry, racism rules the day. We've gone through all kinds of miseries and pain to remain with our existence. And the interesting thing about it is that this nation was established on the principles of freedom and democracy. Freedom and democracy. They, they tell me that this month is a celebration of Black business, a celebration of Black businesses. So I want to talk a little bit about what we mean by Black business. It's very, very important that we as human beings learn how to take care of ourselves, learn how to take what tools we have and develop mechanisms to take care of ourselves. And as my daddy used to say, he would not be moved. As my brothers, Sam and Curtis, and my mama, Lula Mae Jane, would say, we shall not be moved. We shall not be moved just like a tree that's planted by the waters. We shall not be moved. We're fighting segregation. We shall not be moved. We're fighting segregation. We shall not be moved like a tree planted by the waters. We shall not be moved. We're celebrating the establishment of a principle called democracy. Now, there's different systems that exist in this world that's supposed to lift up, provide, and protect all people. Now, one is called communism. Communism. What is a communal system? Most people don't even know what it is. It's where broad-based programs are set up to provide for the welfare of people. That's what it's supposed to be. But if you look at the way it's been implemented, and I have to disagree with Sister Andrea Davis as much as I love her and support her, I am not impressed with the implementation of Marxist philosophy. I am not impressed with Marxism, Stalinism, and the things that have transpired, because it became, instead of an institution for the broader good of all, poverty still exists. And also, people are clamoring for power. Instead of setting up systems that feed the poor, feed the children, what has happened is people have overindulged themselves in the resources that exist, not only in their own country, but they have spread a doctrine throughout the world that has caused problems and issues for people. So I'll be frank and I'll be straight up. Personally, I believe in and support the system known as free enterprise. Free enterprise. In other words, individuals, regardless of their ethnicity, can establish systems that help you create businesses and programs to take care of themselves and not be dependent on government, not to be dependent on anybody else. That's what I love, democracy and free enterprise. Free enterprise also suggests that if you believe in one philosophy and I believe in another, that you have the ability to believe in what you believe in. That's what democracy is all about. But I was just looking at some of my old tapes when we were looking at and we were uplifting communism, and they accused the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, for example, of being a communist. He's not a communist. He's a Democrat. In other words, he believes in democracy. There have been many attempts throughout country for African Americans to set up their own businesses. And you know, when you leave us alone and tell us that we got to do it for ourselves, it comes out wonderful. We had a community in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that people referred to affectionately as the Black Wall Street. Businesses of all kinds were created, and the interesting thing about it, those businesses were successful. Because you know, when we support each other, we are successful. I'm a vendor down in Lebanon Valley supermarket, and every day I purchase something from other vendors. They don't always purchase from me, that's the truth. But I do that, and I'm gonna keep doing that because it's in my genes. When we support each other, the more successful. And we look at Malcolm X and some of the things that he said. Malcolm said he called himself a Black nationalist. Now that's not the same as white nationalism, which is going to be racist. Black nationalists mean nationhood, building your economy, educating your individuals that's in your particular ethnic group. Public housing. We also used to have hospitals, medical things that I've seen to have disappeared off the landscape. Used to be a hospital in Philadelphia, Mercy Douglas Hospital. And we have Black hospitals throughout the country. We don't see that very much anymore. So we need to continue to build our agenda, to build our community. Black Wall Street was a real example of that. And we're going to take a look at some videos that we found to tell you about Black Wall Street. And we're going to discuss Black Wall Street. We're going to talk about what democracy is all about and how we can make a democracy work, and that we should not get involved in a power struggle where our leaders line their pockets while the poor folks can barely feed their families. Okay, but we're going to, I want you to find out about this, and then we're going to talk about it. Black Wall Street, we call it. Tulsa, Oklahoma. This is a video.
The following program contains graphic historical situations and images. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is Tulsa. You know what happened here in 1921, right? I'm on Standpipe Hill, overlooking what was 100 years ago the scene of the worst act of racial violence in American history. Over there, South Main Street, downtown in 1921, a 19-year-old black man was accused of assaulting a 17-year-old white girl in an elevator. He was arrested. Hundreds of armed white locals threatened to lynch him. By the next day, 35 blocks of Tulsa's Greenwood, including Black Wall Street, was in ruins. Churches and homes looted and burned. Hundreds of black residents killed, thousands left homeless. And then came decades and decades of silence. Well, there's a lot to say about this, but let me introduce myself first. My name is Quraysh Ali Lansana, and I'm a Tulsa-based author, poet, educator, and historian. And I've been researching the Greenwood District and the massacre for decades. I'll be walking you through the past, present, and future of Greenwood and how this happened and why. We'll visit with local artists who are working to recultivate the district now, and how you can become a part of the nation's journey for racial healing.
Brought to you in part by Oklahoma Humanities Magazine. Commemorating the centennial of the Tulsa Race Massacre with poetry and reflections on finding hope. Information on free subscriptions at okhumanities.org.
Let's start way back, well before 1921, when Oklahoma held so much promise for African Americans. After the Civil War, formerly enslaved Africans moved to Indian Territory in search of a better life and to escape the harsh racism of their past. From 1865 to 1920, African Americans created more than 50 towns and settlements, one on the north side of Tulsa.
My family members arrived in Oklahoma shortly before statehood by covered wagon. From Texas, coming here looking for a better life, just like so many others. They would work hard to start their businesses. My grandfather, along with my great uncle, were the owners of the Nails Brothers Shoe Shop and Record Shop, located right down the street at 121 North Greenwood Avenue and various locations.
That access to land equated with wealth, particularly back in this period, really buoyed the financial fortunes of communities like Black Wall Street, the Greenwood community in Tulsa, and so forth.
Successful farms, shops, and oil wealth created the need for a place to bank, trade, and enjoy their hard-earned money.
The story goes that O.W. Gurley bought about 40 acres here in the Greenwood area. This had to be in the turn of the century. And he was able to sell a number of lands. And plus there would have been a push to make this young, well, it wasn't even a state then, to make this into a state for black folks.
Greenwood stretches from Pine Street to the north, Archer Street and the Frisco Tracks to the south, Cincinnati Street on the west, and Lansing Street to the east. Within those confines, black entrepreneurs started every imaginable business. Newspapers, hotels, theaters, dentists, attorneys, and over 30 grocery stores.
Hotels being created, not just homes, but hotels created, restaurants, just right off the top, all those things that were needed to service the African American community.
Because of Jim Crow segregation, there was a need for a community that could support black enterprise, because black people couldn't shop in the establishments in the mainstream economy. If black women were maids in wealthy white homes, they went out and worked in those homes in South Tulsa, but they brought the money back in Greenwood and spent the money here. So it really helped the financial foundation of the community.
You would find people who were basically very proud to be able to employ their family members and other community members in those businesses and to be successful as well.
So this was not a financial or investment or banking community. It was a community that was rife with mom and pop businesses.
Black Wall Street had everything at the start of the 1920s. Banks, churches, theaters, grocery stores, law offices, newspapers, schools, everything. That is the subject of this children's book that I wrote with Naja Amatullah Hilton and illustrator Skip Hill. It's a day in the life of an 8-year-old girl that shows how vibrant the district was before the massacre.
Opal's Greenwood Oasis is a delightful children's book that's placed in 1921 Tulsa, Greenwood, community, Black Wall Street. Opal Brown is her name, and Opal Brown is she's probably about 8 years old, and very precocious, smart, curious girl who is on an errand for her mom. It's a simple errand to go pick up cinnamon for the pie that her mother wants to make for the Memorial Day picnic. And if you walk along Greenwood and look down on the sidewalk where plaques have been placed to denote where different businesses were, you can see why it was easy for Opal to get to the store and find cinnamon. Today, there are no retail markets. It's practically a food desert in North Tulsa. So it would be much more challenging for Opal to get on her bike and ride to the store, and that's the result of not only what happened in 1921, but what happened afterwards. So my process is predominantly collage, and I do like the idea of taking elements from 3, 4, 5, 6 different sources, pulling them all together, working them around the composition of them in order to create different views. There is a mix of my own hand-drawn illustrations, and then there's a mix of archival photographs that have been reproduced through digitally manipulated and then printed out, and then I cut those out and lay them into place. So, piece of paper here, piece of paper there, put them together, move them around, glue them down, and look for harmony amongst all those different images. Sounds like a vision for creating a community to me. It's really a challenge, it was really a challenge to find good imagery, source material. Again, we have to keep in mind, family photo albums were destroyed. As far as the collage, you're basically weaving together scraps and threads and residue of history. In many cases, a hidden history, a forgotten history.
One of the things I think about in the course of working with these is that everyone who built Greenwood, who made Greenwood what it was, they all came from someplace else. So I like that idea of kind of people, African Americans, saw Tulsa and Greenwood as a Mecca, as a Eden. If I could just get there, things would be better.
Someone asked me, what do you hope for people to see here? I said, I want them to see just the vitality of the everyday, not in Opal's family and in the community of Greenwood. There's just the everyday. Every day wasn't like super sensational day. There's a beauty in the monotony and just the normal of every day. In between all the tragedies, it's just the joy, the simple, quiet joy of the everyday. And that's what we want to convey. And my hope is, our hope is, there are elements in there that you should be able to relate to regardless of ethnicity. Rather than having it birth out of Black pain, we wanted the story to be birthed out of Black joy, vitality, excellence, and a strong sense of community. The most fascinating thing for me in the course of doing research for this book was the number of people who said, born and raised in Oklahoma, I didn't know. I heard that time and time and time again. So going forward, it's going to be tough to say that I've never heard of it.
According to several newspapers, there were reports of hateful letters sent to prominent business leaders within Black Wall Street, which demanded that they stop overstepping their boundaries into the white, segregated portion of Tulsa.
Another group of people that felt like they were beneath them, that shouldn't have and not own nice things like pianos and silverware and fancy clothes. It did stir up a lot of envy in that, and seemed prosperous. This group of people that made a way out of no way.
We know that a number of interests, industrial interests and other interests, corporate interests in the Tulsa community, wanted the land on which the Black community sat. And we know that there were people plotting behind the scenes to move the Black community farther north and take that land. Jealousy certainly was a factor.
In May of 1921, tensions in Tulsa had reached a fever pitch. It was an event in an elevator downtown that became the catalyst for chaos.
There was a situation between a shoe shiner, Dick Rowland, and Sarah Page, an elevator operator.
Dick Rowland, 19-year-old Black boy, shines shoes downtown. Sarah Page, 17-year-old white girl, operates an elevator in the downtown building called the Drexel Building. Monday, May 30th, 1921, Memorial Day, Dick Rowland is working downtown. He needs to use the restroom. Facilities are segregated.
The story goes that the elevator floors were not even, and he stumbled into the cabin of the elevator and fell upon Sarah, who screamed out.
Someone across the street in a business that heard the scream and came running over, and the story basically was told that he had assaulted her.
He comforted her. He also called the police. She claimed she had been assaulted on the elevator. She would later recant the original story. She would not cooperate with prosecutors after Dick Rowland was arrested.
The elevator incident had many sides of stories. Many said that it was just a lover spat that occurred on the elevator. That's what that was about. There's documentation that states that Dick Rowland and Sarah Page were not strangers, that they knew of each other, that Sarah Page, frequented Greenwood a lot.
It is likely we will never know exactly what happened in that elevator in 1921. But there are a lot of theories, as you will see in This Car Up, a short dance film. This film is a part of the Greenwood Art Project, featuring dozens of local artists who are creating work to educate the public about the massacre and recultivate the neighborhood. The film offers many different scenarios on what may have happened a century ago. Some might surprise you.
I felt like looking at the story of Sarah Page and Dick Rowland in the elevator was a way that I could contribute to the storytelling and the civic healing around the Greenwood Race Massacre, or Tulsa Race Massacre. The film, for me, is a way to look at all these things and explore different relationships. Texture. Maybe they're friends, they're lovers, they're going somewhere special, secret. Please remember what we talked about the boat of the pelvis?
Yes.
I proposed the piece to the Greenwood Art Project well before COVID was on my radar. Oh, one arm. One arm, and the pathway is like a door rather than a scoop. And then I also needed to find dancers who were already working together and sharing germs, so that we could make our safe bubble for them and they could take their masks off. And then this time, can we also loop? When you reach the end, can you just right away, it should end on a 4 or a 5, wait for the next one, or maybe. And then we met by Zoom for about 3 hours to rehearse. They were artists. They showed up and they brought their whole selves, and they were really great to work with. All I need is for you to enjoy yourself.
We are, so.
Yeah, because this is going to be long. It's going to be a long day.
Yeah.
It's going to be a long weekend.
Yeah.
There was a kind of light-aired wonderment in the first scene. We're in all white, there's lots of light, it's about a proposal, it's romantic, like Roma was like working on her romantic like engagement squeal, and so there's this like lightheartedness that makes that part more fun to engage with.
The romantic windows and the white walls can help bring forward the story that, maybe Sarah and David were romantic. And the black void, that black box, they almost seem like, especially when they're wearing white, they almost seem like ghosts, kind of just suspended in time. Yes, just like that. Yeah. And then in the adversarial section, I had a really hard time choreographing for that.
It can be really touchy to go to that aggressive side. So that was a big challenge yesterday. I think it was good to check in with each other.
Don't want to make another piece of art or culture that could be another piece of evidence that Black men are dangerous. But we still have to address it, right? To be responsible and to tell the story. I was really amazed to see how those movement ideas played out in the elevator so differently than in the larger spaces. It seems to put a magnifying glass and really push up the intensity of those exchanges. I'm aware that I'm probably one of the only white artists involved in the Greenwood Art Project. When we were in the black box, we wore whites for our... And I think about 5 years ago, the dip.
Yeah.
The dip. Can you be...
Yeah.
That would have made me real nervous and real upset and question my right to be a part of this. Now I question more my responsibility to be a part of it. I remember when my mom, so we were walking around the pond at the Greenwood Cultural Center in probably 1988 or 89. And I had been going to school in North Tulsa as one of the only white kids at school since kindergarten. And she stopped and she looked at me and she said, "Do you know what happened here?" I said, "No." And she said, there was a massacre. And so I looked around and I was like, well, where are the memorials? Where are the plaques? I didn't think it was true, honestly. I'm interested in it because I'm still processing. Right, but maybe now it's the contact point and flexing the fingers back even. Dance can't really teach you the specifics of time and date and location and address and all of these things. So if it keeps its value because it activates empathy in the audience. And I wanted to put forward, fold time and space, this idea that you could be a little more careful about what you assert to be the reality of things.
As evening approached, rumors of the incident spread quickly. Within an hour of the afternoon paper's arrival, fresh talk of lynching inflamed the crowd of angry white men who had begun to gather outside the county courthouse.
The other factor here in Tulsa was the media, particularly the Tulsa Tribune, which was a daily afternoon newspaper, published a series of incendiary articles and editorials that really inflamed the white community, caused a number of white men in the white community to rise up in a hostile way against the black community.
A group of whites assembled demanding the release of Dick Rowland because they want to lynch him.
The black community members were wanting to make sure that that didn't happen, and they met up at the courthouse or the jailhouse, if you will. There were discussions. Various people had weapons.
Sheriff McCullough told the white mob to go back to your homes. No one's coming after Dick Rowland. Just leave the courthouse. Barney Cleaver, one of the first black law enforcement officers, told the black folks on the north side of the courthouse to go home. There's no need. We don't need your help. We have it handled.
A little after 10 p.m., a rumor began to circulate that the white mob was storming the courthouse. A second group of armed African-American men marched single file into the building. As before, they offered their services to protect Mr. Rowland. Once again, their offer was refused. And then it happened.
The white mob swelled in number, ultimately reaching the thousands. There was a conflict. Words were exchanged between the small black group and the large white group. White men tried to take a black man's gun. The gun discharged, and according to eyewitnesses and survivors, in their words, all hell broke loose after that.
Witnesses say as many as 2,000 armed white men fired on the group as they chased them from the courthouse to the railroad tracks. When dawn came at 5 a.m., a loud whistle or siren sounded, perhaps as a signal for the invasion to begin. White rioters broke into several downtown stores to steal guns and ammunition. The owner of J.W. McGee's Sporting Goods testified that a Tulsa police officer helped pass out guns taken from his shop.
The police were not helpful. The police, we know, deputized some people in the mob who invaded the community and destroyed it.
The white mob invaded the Greenwood area and began to shoot on sight black Tulsans, looting their homes, setting them afire.
My mother was with her family, 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. All of us were in the house when we saw coming up the walk in the front of the house off of Easton Street 4 men with torches in their hands. These torches were burning. When my mother saw them coming, she says, "You get up under the bed, get up under the bed, get up under the bed." And all 4 of us got up under the bed. I was the last one, and my sister grabbed me and pulled me under there. And while I was under the bed, one of the guys coming past the bed stepped on my finger, and as I was about to scream, my sister put her hand over my mouth so I couldn't be heard. Now, I remember that.
I was asleep, and my mother awakened me, and she told me to get up, and so she could dress me. She says, Eldoris, get up so I can get you dressed. The white folks are killing the colored folks. And I thought, when she said that, I jumped up, and I thought that we were just being lined up and ambushed like that. But anyway, in looking out the door, I could see nothing but black rolling smoke.
As fires blazed throughout the night, firefighters were met by the armed mob who prevented them from putting out the flames. First-hand accounts say as many as 6 airplanes were firing rifles and dropping dynamite and firebombs on buildings, homes, and fleeing African Americans.
When we left our house, I was so afraid because bullets were coming down around us. The planes were up in the air, shooting down, and I could hear those bullets falling.
It's highly likely that somebody in one of the airplanes, at least one of them, strafed the community with bullets. And eyewitnesses say that some sort of bombs or incendiary devices were dropped on the community that caused the fires to burn more quickly and more brilliantly.
So you had 40 square blocks just not reduced into billows of smoke, ash, mortar, no more, just shells of their former selves. And so you had people who were shot and laid where they fell, right there on the streets of Greenwood. And so it was just hell on earth at that time. One of the survivors, Kenny Booker, was stated to his little sister when she had asked, "Is the world on fire, Kenny? Is the world on fire?"
Is the world on fire? On an early summer evening, the newspaper announced a lynching. Neighbors shook their heads, bowed them in silent grief, said prayers for a family, for a soul. A few gathered in solidarity to defy the mandates that forced them into humiliating acquiescence. On the other side of the tracks, Sweating, swearing white men stockpiled arms and munitions, revved ground and air engines, set torches aflame, with laughing, whooping, homicidal intent, confident in the assurance there would be no repercussions, no one to interfere, no one to stop them.
Waves of white rioters were shot as they exchanged fire with defenders inside Mount Zion Baptist Church, eventually overwhelming the men inside with machine gun fire.
Up on the Standpipe Hill, they were shooting from there, and where our home was located on Kenosha in the 800 block. We were out in the backyard. My father came and had us to come in because the bullets were falling out of the back shell.
Fierce fighting broke out along Standpipe Hill, where 40 to 50 Tulsa guardsmen traded fire with African-American riflemen who had set up defensive lines off of Elgin Place.
It was 1920 who? 1920 what? 1920 when? 1920 where? 1920 why? Flames lick the sky. Moans fill the air. Hopes and ashes lie, buried on the vacant stairs. It was rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat, assaulted from the front, as suddenly there were flames in Little Africa as white anger burst upon Greenwood. Gunfire and screams, plane fire destroying dreams as they roiled through homes in waves like plagues of locusts. The white mob surged hungrily northward, urged by a primal hatred, seeking to feast on the futures of Black Wall Street.
Black folks felt that the National Guard was there to save them from the mob. Except the National Guard, in turn, placed them in internment camps, like the Convention Hall.
So everybody was scared, you know, and people shooting going on. And we saw those soldiers, we didn't know what those soldiers was to protect her or kill her.
Hundreds of people were marched under armed guard to one of 3 locations: Convention Hall, the county fairgrounds, and McNulty Park.
The next day, around 2 o'clock, the troops came and they marched all the women and kids out on after 15th and Harwood, the county fairgrounds.
So you had about 6,000 people that were held in internment camps while the city burned, while bodies were thrown in the Arkansas River, thrown in pits around the city and buried for a number of days. You know, black folks couldn't even leave the internment camp unless a white person would come in to vouch for them.
The community members ran to various locations. They ran for safety, only to return to find their homes and their businesses looted and burned to the ground.
You didn't have nothing. They burned up our house though. We killed our little bulldog. And so we didn't have nothing.
More than 10,000 people were now homeless and were forced to spend the winter of 1921 in tents while they attempted to rebuild what was left of their lives.
After the riot, they gave everyone tents, you know, to live in. That's what they were supposed to have to live in. My father took one, and he built the floor, you know, got wood and built, made a floor and all, because he said he wouldn't have us on the ground. We stayed in those tents. Maybe 5 to 6 months.
Over 1,200 homes were burned or looted. Property losses amounted to $1.5 million. That's $32 million today. There were countless injuries, and it's believed over 300 people were killed, maybe more. These are the stairs to nowhere. Once a thriving residential area in the Greenwood district, now empty lots where once families lived and enjoyed life in the district. Sometimes I wonder what Greenwood would be now if none of this had ever happened. And that's the goal of an art project combining film, poetry, and wood mosaics.
My biological father came from, from Somaliland, and literally, like when the Civil War broke out, bombs are being dropped on your house by the government. So it reminded me of what happened in Greenwood. One minute, everything is fine, and then the next moment, it's all gone. My name's Ebony Mandalas, and I'm an artist. I love to tell stories through my work. I would definitely say a lot of my choices are influenced by my background. In 2008, I went to visit my family in Somaliland. We were getting henna done, and my art just kind of lent itself to that. My art since then has definitely become a lot more free. Close to a year and a half ago, Tony Brinkley got in touch with me because he had this idea called Greenwood Imagine. Tony, he's a poet, amazing, phenomenal, award-winning poet, and his grandson, Derek Tinsley, is a filmmaker. And so they were looking for a painter to create a series of murals that would go along with the poem. And so I proposed to him that I create the murals solely out of wood.
This is where you have to make sure not to cut your hand off.
So the very first scene is like the past. So it's like, let's show what Greenwood was like before destruction. So it's this beautiful scene of the little girl with her father walking through town with an ice cream cone. The second scene was pretty much created after reading through a series of interviews, but this one specifically talked about, it was a survivor. I believe she was about 5 years old when the massacre occurred. And she talked about these reoccurring dreams that she would have. And to me, it sounded like PTSD. Like she talked about the smoke, and she talked about the smells, and she talked about the fire. And it was just so vivid, her description, like I immediately was able to create a sketch for it. I guess in some ways I may have went that direction because my father was murdered by police officers, and so that idea of this father-daughter relationship and loss like resonated with me, and then reading these stories about people who lost parents in Greenwood definitely resonated. The third scene is let's imagine what it could have been like. Like, what would it be like if, had the massacre never occurred? There will be some puzzle pieces missing. And so then we'll have someone from the audience come up and place it into the piece.
Let's imagine a what if. What if the massacre never happened? What if Tulsa residents had enjoyed free reign to flourish into the future, and Greenwood never lost that yes, we can mindset? Can you imagine this?
But basically it's like we have the power to recreate, like a new Greenwood. We just need to believe in it and just go for it.
Rebuilding wasn't easy. Many people had a hard time getting lumber. Whites didn't want to sell them lumber. Families and business owners had to sue the city to get a release so they could get the tools they needed. Some said it was no secret they didn't want us to rebuild. That was evident.
This fellow that Dad got the lumber from owned the lumber company. They had threatened him if he sold Dad any lumber to build a house out there. But he was taking a chance anyway. He was a Christian man. He said, "You got a wife and some kids." And he said, "I'm gonna go ahead and sell you this lumber anyway."
Once those ordinances were overturned, black folks were able to build, but still had to deal with financing the construction, which many of the banks would not finance the reconstruction. Those who had insurance, there were riot clauses. We don't like the term riot because it was used as a term for the insurance companies to get out of paying back on those claims because of that so-called riot clause.
By 1925, most of the destroyed businesses had been rebuilt, and the streets were once again bustling with cars and pedestrians. North of the Frisco tracks, temporary wooden homes lined the hillsides overlooking Greenwood.
In my time as a little girl, I had the opportunity to experience businesses right around the corner from our home. It was a wonderful community, a very vibrant community, if you will.
Oh, it was like a renaissance because it not only were the older buildings replaced, but the Greenwood Avenue began to grow much larger.
The Greenwood business area was even better than the one that had preceded it.
In the late 1960s, urban renewal, integration, and the highway cut through the heart of the Greenwood community.
This thing called the civil rights period came along. It was a good thing and it was a bad thing. But the good thing about it, that no longer that black folks will be relegated just to stay in one area, to be just segregated in one area. They could spend their black dollars in white stores all over Tulsa. And that's what they did. We can move anywhere we want to in Tulsa, so we thought. There was no need for having business on Greenwood. It was much better. I can go out south and go to many malls, where I can spend my dollars out there. I can go to nice restaurants out there because now it's legal out there. And so we did not sustain what kept us sustained for decades. We went for something shiny. It began to decay because all those buildings just started dying, those businesses. They could not sustain without that black dollar.
Our community lost twice. It was destroyed during the race massacre, but it was again destroyed during urban renewal or removal, as some call it. That bridge was built around that time as well. We lost a lot of our historical sites and designations in the community.
The highway came out right during the same time the demise of Greenwood. Who would have thunk it? Because that freeway cut right through the black community. I mean, just wheeling its force from left to right, destroying right on top of the footprints of my great-grandfather's Zulu Lounge. Where that place once stood, that freeway, the I-244, stands on top of my inheritance.
The highway didn't just cut through the heart of Greenwood. It is believed to have covered over one of the many sites where witnesses say hundreds of bodies are buried.
I think we're going to cut short
After 100
this video.
years, archaeologists began to
We're going
search
to cut
many...
short this video. A lot of information has been provided to you. Tulsa, Oklahoma. This was what they call the Black Wall Street, Greenwood section, Tulsa. But it was a horrible, horrible experience And it happened over and over and over again in this country. When Black folks and African Americans begin to prosper, then they're attacked or they're discriminated against, or it is torn down. And then we have the prospect of building and rebuilding. And we have some African Americans that don't understand that it's critically important that we support each other, that we combine our resources and our skills, and we put together a community. Now, retail is only one aspect of one type of business. Manufacturing is another. We have a lot of engineers. My father's brother, James Hopkins, was an engineer. If we can pull together those resources and not be afraid to buy from each other. And I mentioned this and I'll mention it again, and I got to do it over and over again, that to come by and say hi to a Black business that's struggling to exist doesn't help. Stay home. We need people to be supportive, to make purchases. Doesn't mean you have to come and empty your wallet. It doesn't mean that you have to buy something that you're not interested in or doesn't need. It means that there's got to be something there, small or big. Purchase something, man. Uplift the individual that's putting it all together and trying to make it work. Because without you, without your support, they'll perish. Black business was perish. And I say it again in Lebanon, a great percentage of Blacks that come in that store don't even turn to look. As a matter of fact, they look the other way rather than support a business that's set up, ran, and owned people of African descent. We need you. We need your help. We need you to come together. Don't say you're going to celebrate Black Business Month. Your celebrations and hallelujah, and we're going to support you, and don't spend a dime, doesn't help. We got some Black businesses, for example, in Harrisburg. And of course, business is designed to cater to all people. My business, I sell to anyone who comes in and want to make a purchase. And thank God for that. Puerto Rican community is very supportive of the business that I have. Many whites are supportive. And where I fall short is with the majority of African Americans. Heartbreaking, sad, doesn't do us any good. We need you. Okay, we don't need to show the business, my business right now, please. I want to talk to these people. I'm not uplifting my business. I'm uplifting the concept of Black business. 35 South 8th Street in Lebanon. You know, at the end of the show, we do a business thing, and our show gonna give my business and that kind of thing. But today, I just want to talk to you. If you need something, oils, clothing, art, that kind of thing, and you're African American, put an African American business first. Celebrate by buying. Celebrate by making a purchase. Celebrate by giving some support to individuals who are trying to make it work. We got a number of people everywhere and anywhere that are setting up business, that they are trying to survive. And I'm gonna tell you, it is a difficult thing to be an African American in Harrisburg, in Lebanon, in any area, and be able to survive. Every week, we show that film, and it gives you a broad range of the things that we have for you to purchase every week. And it's gotten so horrible. Last week, we made $40, 3 days a week. Sad, ridiculous. Again, we need your support. You need our support. Because once we set this thing where it's supposed to be, then it's going to help everyone. And just to throw out something in terms of what's happening in Lebanon, we had a number of businesses to shut down. And I'm hoping that the market will be able to survive and thrive and do well. I mean, like I said, I'm 80 years old. As long as my health holds up, I'm going to have some kind of business. And one day, I want to reopen my my museum, African American Museum. We had one in Middletown. We briefly had one on 3rd Street. If we can raise the underlying cost, and you got to have some capital in order to stay alive in this kind of business. But my long-range goal is to see a local African-American business. We got some individuals that are still alive, historians, people like Caleb Jackson, who's one of the most wonderful human beings on the planet Earth, that's still with us, that can help us to put together a business or a museum. I did a combination of a gift store and a museum. And that's what we want to do. We want to record our history. We want to present that history to the public. We want to encourage people of all ethnicities. That doesn't mean white folks can't come in and buy it. You're totally welcome. Because if you didn't, quite frankly, I would be so far behind the 8 ball that we would not exist. And I want to say again, thank you for tuning in, listening to the Richard James Show. And we look forward to seeing you next week. And we want to say God bless you. And thank God we got a Black-owned business called The Voice 17104, owned and operated by the Thomas family. And we need your business. We want you to support The Voice and support what we're trying to do. God bless you, and may heaven smile upon you. I am your neighbor. I am your friend. I am your brother. Take care, and I'll see you next week. The Richard James Show signing off. Take care.
Thank you again for tuning in to the James Show. Our African and our African American programs are set up to educate you on what's going on in this world. We thank you for taking out the time to listen. Let us hear from you sometime also. So this is your neighbor and your friend signing off. Until I see you again next week and hear from you again next week. So long. God bless.